presentation that I gave at the Knowledge Commercialization Australasia conference focused on 3 ways to, in the context of innovation and technology commercialization, to disrupt first ourselves and others. And so those 3 ways that I suggested were, first of all, knowing our customers and acting accordingly. Secondly, knowing our landscape and acting accordingly. And thirdly, knowing our intangible assets and acting accordingly. So we've talked a bit about knowing our IP landscape and acting accordingly and making good decisions based on that evidence that can then pave the way for innovations to succeed. That is really worth exploring and learning about in terms of how to disrupt first ourselves and then others, is knowing our intangible assets and acting accordingly. So in this context, I am talking about intangible assets, particularly in the form of people, and even more specifically in collectives of people, so groups of people. So for example, we know about lots of really good, big leading organizations which invest a lot in their people. They'll invest in the campuses that their people work in. They'll invest in the social spaces that their areas have. There's even a major organization, for example, that has decided in one of their major head offices that none of their employees will ever be more than 30 meters away from food. And to me, that sounds amazing. That sounds like paradise. And the reason that they've decided something like this is because in having people congregate around food, their employees will then be socializing with each other, talking with each other, enjoying conversations with each other. And those conversations will not just be task related or even activity related. They'll be conversations about lots of other things, which will obviously involve, some personal aspects as well. But the important thing is that in the engagement of people together, they create a shared sense of purpose, they create a shared sense of engagement, and there is a shared joy even in being there. So what we're talking about here is collectives of people and the intangible assets that are available, and in some cases, not necessarily tapped as well as they might be in collectives of people. So in particular, even, we want to think about groups of people and how those groups of people interact with other groups of people. So for example, an organization might have an internal research and development team. That internal research and development team will have some interaction with the organization's marketing team. If the R&D team and the marketing team are working well together, that can bring about an enormous competitive advantage for that organization. On the other hand, however, if the R&D team and the marketing team are not working together as well as they might, or in some cases, it can happen that they're really even working adversely to each other. Again, that's an opportunity cost, and that's a loss of competitive advantage that the organization could otherwise have had. So that's an example where we're talking about 2 groups of people who are internal to an organization. We can also think about the intangible assets that are contained in a group of people that's internal to the organization and then one that's external. So if we go back to thinking about our R&D team, if we have an R&D team that's working well, say, with a group of external customers or customer advocates. If that work is going well between those 2 groups, an amazing competitive advantage is created for the organization. Conversely, though, R&D team, if it's not working well with customers and partners, then that's an opportunity cost. Or if it's even working adversely for some reason, then even more of a loss. So in this case, what we're talking about is sometimes called social capital. It's about groups of people who are adaptive and who, in working with each other, create synergy. And so knowing our intangible assets in the form of those people, the groups of people who work together with each other, is incredibly valuable, because if we know what our intangible assets are, we can then understand whether they're enabling us or whether they're constraining our growth. When we talk about intangible assets, who are people, and people who are individuals obviously are important, but in this particular area, we're concentrating even more on groups of people. So we're thinking about people collectively. People are complex, people are multifaceted, people are not always easy to understand, and people don't fall into black and white categories. And so an important part of understanding our intangible assets is really taking the time to understand which groups of people within our organization need to be really operating super well together in order for our organization to gain its competitive advantage, and to be aware if they're not working as well together as they might, what are some ways that we could explore how they could work better together. And so we do have a methodology here at Glasshouse Advisory, which is called Sustaining Intellectual Advantage. And the methodology involves a very deep and probing interview method where, first of all, obviously, we gain the trust of the people that we're working with, and everything is kept in complete confidentiality. But then we'll work with individuals, first of all, who are parts of these groups of people within organizations, and we'll explore key things which are important in the individual's lived experience, and then we'll build upon those key things to enable the groups of people to work better together. And that is then a further step along the way to creating a greater competitive advantage for the organization.